Tabitha Sanders clutched at the wooden post behind her as the winds picked up, dust swirling around her skirts as her husband's silhouette disappeared over the horizon. She couldn't believe Frank had done this, left her tied to a post in the middle of nowhere, all because she'd questioned him about the missing money from their store's earnings. The rope cut into her wrists as she struggled against her bindings, her throat raw from screaming. For 3 hours, she'd been stranded on this desolate stretch outside Silvercreek, Colorado. The year was 1876, and the West was still wild enough that a man could leave his wife to die in the elements and likely get away with it. The sun beat down mercilessly on her exposed face and neck. Her bonnet had been torn away by the wind, and her chestnut hair whipped around her face, stinging her eyes. She'd long since stopped crying, her tears dried by the harsh summer air. Frank had changed since they'd moved west from Boston 2 years ago, grown cruel, possessive, and increasingly violent. Tabitha had endured his temper, his drinking, and his gambling, but this betrayal was beyond anything she could have imagined. In the distance, she spotted a plume of dust rising from the trail. Someone was coming. Tabitha renewed her struggles, ignoring the pain as the rough rope scraped her skin raw. "Help!" she cried, her voice barely more than a rasp. "Please help me." As the rider drew closer, Tabitha could make out the broad-shouldered silhouette of a man atop a chestnut stallion. He rode with confidence, his posture straight and tall in the saddle. The horseman slowed his mount, approaching with caution. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep and wary. "Please," Tabitha croaked. "I've been left here, tied up. Please help me." The man dismounted with fluid grace, revealing himself to be tall and lean. He wore simple clothes, worn denim, a blue cotton shirt, leather vest, and dusty boots, nothing like the fancy Eastern suits Frank favored. A cowboy, by the look of him. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he had a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. "What in tarnation?" he muttered, approaching her cautiously. "Who did this to you, madam?" "My husband," she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks despite her dire situation. The cowboy's expression hardened. He pulled a knife from his belt and moved behind her. "Hold still now." With a few careful cuts, the rope fell away. Tabitha's legs, weak from standing for hours, buckled beneath her. The cowboy caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms wrapping around her waist. "I've got you," he said softly, helping her to stand. "Name's Nate Greaves. Most folks call me Nate." "Tabitha Sanders," she replied, her voice trembling as she rubbed her raw wrists. "Thank you, Mr. Greaves." "No need for thanks, Mrs. Sanders. No decent man would leave anyone like this." His eyes, a deep hazel flecked with gold, searched her face with concern. "You're burned something fierce from the sun. Let's get you some water and shade." Nate led her to his horse, retrieving a canteen from his saddlebag. Tabitha drank gratefully, the water soothing her parched throat. "Where were you headed?" she asked after a moment, realizing she had nowhere to go. She couldn't return to Frank, not after this. "I've got a small ranch about 5 miles north of here," Nate explained, gesturing toward the distant hills. "I can take you to town if you'd prefer, or—" He hesitated. "You're welcome to rest at my place until you decide what to do next." Tabitha considered her options. The nearest town was Silvercreek, where Frank would surely be looking for her once he sobered up and regretted his actions, or worse, if he returned to finish what he'd started. "Your ranch," she decided, "if it wouldn't be too much trouble." Nate nodded, his expression solemn. "No trouble at all, madam. Can you ride?" "Yes," she assured him, though in truth, she'd only ridden side saddle in Boston parks before marrying Frank. Nate helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. His chest pressed against her back as he reached around her for the reins, and Tabitha stiffened at the unfamiliar proximity. "My apologies for the impropriety," he said, as if sensing her discomfort. "We'll be there soon." They rode in silence, Tabitha acutely aware of the strength in the arms that bracketed her. For the first time in hours, she felt safe. The Greaves ranch was modest but well-kept, a small cabin with a barn and corral, nestled in a valley between rolling hills. A creek ran nearby, and a few cattle grazed in the distance. It was nothing like the townhouse she'd shared with Frank above their general store, but something about its simplicity called to her. Nate dismounted first, then gently helped Tabitha down. Her legs threatened to give way again, and he steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "Let me tend to your wrists," he offered, leading her inside the cabin. The interior was sparse but clean: a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes, and a bed in the corner. Nate motioned for her to sit while he fetched a basin of water and some clean cloths. "This might sting," he warned before gently cleaning the abrasions on her wrists. His touch was surprisingly tender for hands so weathered by work. "How long have you been out here?" Tabitha asked, trying to distract herself from the pain. 8 years, Nate replied. "Came west after the war. Worked cattle drives for a spell, then saved enough to buy this place 3 years back." "The war?" Tabitha looked at him with new understanding. He couldn't be much older than 30, which meant he'd been little more than a boy during the conflict. "Union cavalry," he confirmed with a nod. "Signed up at 16, though I told them I was 18. Spent most of my time in Tennessee." Tabitha was about to respond when a knock at the door startled them both. Nate frowned, reaching for the rifle that leaned against the wall. "Stay here," he instructed, moving cautiously to the door. He opened it to reveal an older woman with silver-streaked black hair and a basket on her arm. "Evening, Nate," she said cheerfully before spotting Tabitha. "Oh, I didn't know you had company." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Nate greeted her, lowering his rifle. "This is Mrs. Sanders. She's had some trouble on the road." The woman's dark eyes took in Tabitha's disheveled appearance and injured wrists. Her expression softened with understanding. "I see. Well, I brought you some of those corn muffins you like, and it looks like I came just in time." She stepped inside, setting her basket on the table. "I'm Elena Rodriguez. My husband Miguel and I have the ranch on the other side of the creek." "Pleased to meet you," Tabitha replied, self-consciously smoothing her hair. "I apologize for my appearance." "Nonsense," Elena waved away her concerns. "What you need is a proper meal, a bath, and some clean clothes." She turned to Nate. "I'll take her to our place. Sophia left some dresses behind when she married and moved to Denver. They might fit Mrs. Sanders here." Nate looked to Tabitha. "It might be more comfortable for you there," he said. "The Rodriguezes have been good neighbors to me." Tabitha felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving Nate's cabin, which surprised her. But Elena was right, she needed a bath and proper clothes. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Rodriguez," she said gratefully. "Call me Elena," the older woman insisted. "Nate, heat some water for her before we go. The poor thing looks ready to collapse." While Nate prepared warm water for her to wash with, Elena busied herself making a simple meal from the provisions in his cupboards. The domesticity of the scene made Tabitha's heart ache. This was how a home should feel: warm, safe, with people who cared for one another's well-being. Her life with Frank had been cold and tense, filled with his criticism and her constant fear of setting off his temper. After washing her face and hands and eating Elena's simple but delicious stew, Tabitha felt somewhat revived. Elena insisted on brushing and rebraiding her hair, clucking sympathetically over the sunburn on her neck and cheeks. "I have a salve that will help with that," she promised. "Now, let's get you to my house for a proper bath and rest." Tabitha turned to Nate, who had been quietly watching from across the room. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Greaves. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Just Nate, please," he replied with a small smile that transformed his serious face. "And you're welcome to return once you're settled. I imagine we have some things to discuss about your situation." Tabitha nodded, knowing he was right. Frank wouldn't simply let her go. She would need to make plans. At the Rodriguez ranch, Alina drew Tabitha a bath in a private room and provided her with one of her daughter's dresses, a simple blue cotton garment that fit well enough with a few pins. The older woman asked no invasive questions but made it clear that Tabitha was welcome to stay as long as she needed. That night, lying in a comfortable bed in the Rodriguez's guest room, Tabitha stared at the ceiling, contemplating her future. Frank had left her to die, and in doing so had severed whatever obligation she might have felt toward him. But what now? She had no money of her own, no family in Colorado, and no skills beyond running a household and helping in the store. The next morning, Tabitha woke to the smell of coffee and tortillas. Alina was busy in the kitchen, and her husband Miguel, a tall man with a kind face and graying mustache, introduced himself warmly. "Nate is a good man," Miguel told her over breakfast. "One of the best I know. If he helped you, there must be a reason." "I'm afraid I was simply in the right place for his kindness," Tabitha replied. "Or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it." Miguel shook his head. "There is no coincidence in life, only destiny." After breakfast, Alina helped Tabitha select 2 more dresses from her daughter's old clothes. "Sophia won't miss these," she assured Tabitha. "And every woman needs a change of clothes." Later that morning, Nate arrived on horseback. Tabitha felt her heart quicken at the sight of him standing in the doorway, hat in hand. He looked different in the daylight, younger, though no less imposing. "Mrs. Sanders," he greeted her with a slight bow. "I hope you rested well." "I did, thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "And please call me Tabitha." Alina exchanged a knowing look with her husband. "Why don't you two take a walk? It's a beautiful morning." Tabitha followed Nate outside, grateful for the sturdy boots Alina had also provided. They strolled toward the creek, the morning sun warming their shoulders. "I need to ask you something difficult," Nate said after a moment of comfortable silence. "Your husband, is he likely to come looking for you?" Tabitha considered the question. "Frank has a temper, but he's also a coward at heart. He left me out there thinking nature would do his dirty work." She shivered despite the warmth. "But if he learns I survived and that I might tell others what he did, yes, he might come." Nate nodded gravely. "Then we need to decide what to do." "You could go to the sheriff in Silvercreek, but Sheriff Davis and Frank play poker together," Tabitha interrupted. "And Frank has convinced most of the town that I'm unstable, too delicate for frontier life." The humiliation of it burned in her chest. No one would believe me over him. "I believe you," Nate said simply. The sincerity in his voice made Tabitha's eyes sting with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You could leave," Nate suggested. "Take the stage to Denver, start fresh." Tabitha shook her head. "With what money? Everything I have is tied up in the store. And Frank would find me eventually." She paused, gathering her courage. "I want to divorce him." Nate's eyebrows rose in surprise. Divorce was uncommon and often scandalous, especially for women. "It won't be easy," he warned. "But if that's what you want, I'll help however I can." "Why?" Tabitha asked, genuinely curious. "You don't know me." Nate was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over the rocks in the creek. "I had a sister," he finally said. "Rebecca. She married a man who turned out to be not what he seemed. He hurt her badly. By the time I found out, it was too late." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't help her then. Maybe I can help you now." Tabitha touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry about your sister." Nate nodded, his expression softening. So am I, but right now we need to focus on keeping you safe. Over the next few days, Tabitha settled into life at the Rodriguez ranch. Elena taught her to make tortillas and tamales, while Miguel showed her how to ride properly, not side saddle, but astride, like the local women. Nate visited daily, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers, a book from his collection, fresh honey from his beehives. A week after her rescue, Nate arrived with a grave expression. "Frank's been asking about you in town," he reported, "telling people you ran off with valuables from the store. He's offered a reward for information." Tabitha's blood ran cold. "What should we do?" "I've been thinking about that," Nate replied. "If we go to the territorial court in Denver instead of the local sheriff, you might have a better chance, but we need evidence of his cruelty." "My word isn't enough," Tabitha said bitterly. "Unfortunately, no," Nate agreed. "But I have an idea." The next day, Nate and Miguel rode into Silvercreek, returning with a man Tabitha didn't recognize, a photographer named Thomas Wells. "Mr. Wells is going to document your injuries," Nate explained, "and take a statement from me about how I found you." Thomas set up his equipment with quiet efficiency. "I'm also a notary," he told Tabitha. "Your statement will be legally sworn." The process was uncomfortable, having her still healing wrists photographed, recounting the events leading to Frank tying her to the post. But when it was done, Tabitha felt strangely lighter. "I'll develop these and bring copies tomorrow," Thomas promised. "And I'll keep this between us for now. My sister left an abusive husband last year. I understand the need for discretion." After Thomas left, Nate lingered. He and Tabitha sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. "Thank you," Tabitha said softly, "for all of this." Nate turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the golden light. "You don't need to thank me. You're the one finding the courage to stand up to him." "I wouldn't have that courage without your help," Tabitha admitted. "I spent 2 years walking on eggshells around Frank, thinking if I was just perfect enough, he wouldn't get angry. I didn't realize until you found me that I deserve better than simply not being hurt." Nate's hand found hers on the porch railing, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "You deserve happiness, Tabitha, real happiness." The touch of his hand sent a flutter through her chest that both excited and frightened her. It was too soon to have such feelings, too complicated. She gently withdrew her hand. "I should help Elena with supper," she said, rising to her feet. Nate nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll be back tomorrow." The next day, Thomas returned with the photographs and legal documents. The images were stark and disturbing: Tabitha's raw, bloodied wrists, the bruises on her arms where Frank had grabbed her before tying her up, the rope burns on her neck. "These will help," Thomas assured her. "I've also brought divorce papers. You'll need to fill these out and file them in Denver." Tabitha looked at the papers, her hand trembling slightly as she took them. This was really happening. "I'll take you to Denver when you're ready," Nate offered. "It's a 3-day ride." "You've already done so much," Tabitha protested. "Let him help," Elena urged from the doorway. "A woman traveling alone attracts attention. With Nate, you'll be safer." Tabitha knew they were right. Besides, the thought of Nate's company on the journey was far from unpleasant. They planned to leave in 2 days, but fate had other ideas. That evening, as they finished supper, Miguel's ranch hand burst into the house, breathless. "Riders coming," he gasped. 6 men, including Frank Sanders, they're armed. Tabitha's heart lurched. "How did he find me?" "Someone must have talked," Miguel said grimly, reaching for his shotgun. "We have maybe 10 minutes. Nate was on his feet immediately. "We need to get Tabitha out of here." "The back trail through the creek," Miguel suggested. "Take my fastest horse." Elena thrust a bundle into Tabitha's arms. Your clothes and some food, hurry." Tabitha changed quickly into the riding clothes Alina had altered for her hands shaking as she buttoned the shirt. By the time she emerged, Nate had saddled Miguel's bay mare and his own stallion. "Stay close to me," he instructed, helping her mount. "We'll ride for my place first to throw them off, then head north toward my friend's hunting cabin." They slipped away just as the sound of approaching horses reached the ranch house. Nate led them through the creek, the water masking their tracks, then up a steep trail that wound into the hills. Tabitha clung to the saddle, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. They rode hard for an hour before Nate signaled for them to stop and listen. The night was quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. "I think we've lost them for now," Nate whispered. "But we should keep moving." They continued at a slower pace, the horses picking their way carefully through the darkness. Tabitha's muscles ached from the unaccustomed riding, but she didn't complain. Every mile between her and Frank was a victory. Near midnight, they reached Nate's cabin. He didn't light a lantern, moving confidently in the dark as he gathered supplies. "We'll rest for an hour, then keep going," he told her, handing her a canteen. "The cabin we're heading for is about 15 miles north, deep in the forest. Frank won't find it easily." Tabitha sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. "I've put you all in danger," she said miserably. "Miguel and Alina can take care of themselves," Nate assured her. "Miguel was a soldier too, and he has ranch hands. Besides, they can honestly say they don't know where we've gone." They rested briefly, then continued their journey through the moonlit landscape. By dawn, they reached a small log cabin nestled among towering pines. A stream burbled nearby, and the air was fragrant with the scent of evergreens. "My friend Jake uses this for hunting," Nate explained as he unlocked the door. "But he's in California for the summer. We'll be safe here." The cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a small table and chairs, and a bed in the corner. Nate immediately set about building a fire to ward off the morning chill. "You should rest," he told Tabitha. "Take the bed. I'll keep watch." Too tired to argue, Tabitha lay down, still in her clothes. Despite her fear and the strangeness of the situation, she fell asleep almost instantly. She woke to the smell of coffee and something savory. The cabin was warm, sunlight streaming through the windows. Nate sat at the table cleaning his revolver. "Good afternoon," he greeted her with a small smile. "You've been asleep for hours, hungry." Tabitha sat up, surprised to find a blanket had been draped over her. "Starving," she admitted. Nate served her a bowl of stew he'd made from preserved meat and wild onions. As they ate, he outlined his plan. "We'll stay here 2 days, then circle back toward town. There's a settlement about 30 miles west where we can catch the stage to Denver. Frank won't expect us to head that way." Tabitha nodded, grateful for his strategic thinking. "What about the divorce papers? We left them at the Rodriguez ranch." "Thomas made copies," Nate revealed, pulling folded papers from his saddlebag. "I had a feeling we might need to leave in a hurry." Tears of gratitude welled in Tabitha's eyes. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Nate admitted, his expression turning serious. "Frank won't give up easily. Even with the divorce, he might keep coming after you." "I know," Tabitha said quietly, "but I can't live in fear forever." The 2 days in the cabin passed in a strange bubble of peace amidst their uncertain circumstances. They established a comfortable routine, Nate hunting and checking the perimeter, Tabitha cooking and keeping the cabin tidy. In the evenings, they talked by the fire. Tabitha told Nate about her childhood in Boston, her dreams of adventure that had led her to marry Frank when he proposed moving west. Nate shared stories of his time on cattle drives, the characters he'd met, the places he'd seen. On the second night, sitting side by side on a bench outside the cabin. Watching the stars emerge, Tabitha found herself studying Nate's profile in the fading light. "What made you decide to settle here?" she asked. "After all your traveling." Nate considered the question. "I got tired of not belonging anywhere," he finally answered. "Wanted something that was mine, something to build." He glanced at her. "What about you? What do you want now?" Tabitha looked up at the vast expanse of stars. "Freedom," she said softly. "The chance to make my own choices. Maybe. To find what you found, a place to belong." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, Tabitha thought he might kiss her. Her breath caught in her throat. But Nate simply reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "You will," he promised. The next morning they set out at first light, taking a circuitous route toward the western settlement. They traveled cautiously, avoiding main trails and stopping frequently to listen for pursuers. By midday, they'd covered nearly 15 miles without incident. They paused to rest near a stream, letting the horses drink while they ate a simple meal of jerky and hard biscuits. "We should reach town by nightfall," Nate said, studying the terrain ahead. "The stage comes through tomorrow afternoon." Tabitha nodded, trying to ignore the pang she felt at the thought of their journey ending. The past days with Nate had shown her what a partnership based on respect could be like. The contrast with her life with Frank couldn't have been more stark. They had just mounted up to continue when the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Nate's horse reared in panic, and Tabitha saw him clutch his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. "Ride," he shouted, wheeling his horse around to face the direction of the shot. "Go north, fast as you can." "I'm not leaving you," Tabitha cried, pulling her horse alongside his. More shots rang out, bullets kicking up dirt around them. Through the trees, Tabitha could see riders approaching Frank at the lead, his face contorted with rage even at this distance. Nate fired back with his revolver, then grabbed Tabitha's reins. "Together then. Now." They galloped away, crashing through underbrush, ducking low to avoid branches. Behind them, shouts and the thunder of hooves indicated pursuit. Nate led them into increasingly rough terrain, using his knowledge of the land to their advantage. They crossed a shallow river, rode hard up a steep embankment, then doubled back along a ridge. The maneuvers seemed to work. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter. Nate's face was pale, his shirt soaked with blood where the bullet had grazed his upper arm. "We need to find shelter," Tabitha said anxiously. "You're losing too much blood." "There's a mining camp about 3 miles ahead," Nate replied through gritted teeth. "Abandoned now, but the cabins should still be standing." They pushed on, Nate swaying slightly in his saddle. Tabitha rode close beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. By the time they reached the abandoned camp, a cluster of dilapidated cabins in a small clearing, Nate was barely conscious. Tabitha helped him dismount and led him into the most intact cabin. She eased him onto a dusty cot, then hurriedly gathered what she needed to tend his wound: water from her canteen, strips torn from her petticoat, and the small flask of whiskey Nate carried in his saddlebag. "This will hurt," she warned him, pouring whiskey over the wound. Nate hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "You've done this before," he observed as she expertly cleaned and bandaged his arm. "Frank wasn't always careful with his fists," Tabitha replied, her voice carefully neutral. "I learned to tend my own injuries." Anger flashed in Nate's eyes, but he said nothing as she finished binding his arm. "We should be safe here for the night," Tabitha said, glancing out the dirty window at the darkening sky. "They won't track us easily in the dark." Nate nodded, leaning back against the wall. "First light, we'll head for the settlement. It's not far now." Tabitha made a small fire in the cabin's decrepit stove and heated some of their remaining food. As they ate, The tension of their escape gradually eased, replaced by an awareness of their isolation and proximity. "Why did you come back for me?" Nate asked suddenly. "When I was shot, you could have gotten away." Tabitha met his gaze steadily. "I couldn't leave you behind, not after everything you've done for me." "Is that the only reason?" His voice was quiet, his eyes searching hers. Tabitha's heart raced. "No," she admitted softly, "that's not the only reason." Nate reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. "Tabitha!" The distant sound of voices froze them both. Nate was on his feet in an instant, revolver in hand, peering through the cabin's broken window. "Lanterns," he whispered. "At least 4 men moving this way." Tabitha's blood ran cold. "How did they find us?" "Doesn't matter now," Nate said grimly. "There's a back door. We need to get to the horses." They slipped out the rear of the cabin and crept toward where they'd left the horses tied. But they were too late. 2 men were already there, untying the animals. One of them was Frank. "There," Frank shouted, spotting them. "Don't let them escape." Nate fired, forcing the men to duck for cover. "Run," he urged Tabitha, pushing her toward the trees. "I'll hold them off." But Tabitha had spent enough time running. As Frank emerged from behind the horses, leveling his pistol at Nate, she acted on pure instinct. Grabbing a heavy branch from the ground, she swung it with all her might, catching Frank across the chest. He staggered backward, surprised by the attack. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, recovering quickly and advancing on her. "After everything I've given you, you gave me nothing but pain," Tabitha spat back, standing her ground. "And you left me to die." Frank lunged for her, but Nate was there, tackling him to the ground. The 2 men grappled in the dirt, trading blows. Despite his injured arm, Nate fought fiercely, his face set with determination. Frank's companion rushed forward to help, but Tabitha intercepted him, swinging the branch again. It connected with his knee, and he went down with a howl of pain. The commotion had alerted the rest of Frank's posse. Shouts rang out as more men approached through the trees. Nate managed to get the upper hand, knocking Frank unconscious with a powerful right hook. He scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. "We need to go now." They ran for the horses, Nate boosting Tabitha into the saddle before mounting his own stallion. As they galloped away, bullets whizzed past them, but the darkness and the trees provided cover. They rode hard through the night, not daring to stop until dawn painted the eastern sky with pale light. Finally, they paused in a sheltered ravine, both exhausted and aching from the night's ordeal. "Are you hurt?" Nate asked, dismounting stiffly. "No," Tabitha assured him, sliding from her saddle. Her legs nearly buckled and she grabbed the horse for support. "Just tired. Your arm." "Bleeding again," Nate admitted, looking at the crimson stain spreading on his bandage. "But we're alive." Tabitha rebandaged his wound as best she could with their limited supplies. "The settlement can't be far now," she said hopefully. "Just over that ridge," Nate confirmed, pointing west. Another hour's ride. They rested briefly, then continued, keeping to cover where possible. No signs of pursuit emerged, giving them hope that they'd truly escaped this time. The settlement, when they reached it, was little more than a cluster of buildings around a dusty main street: a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a stage-coach station. But to Tabitha, it looked like salvation. They rode directly to the station, where Nate inquired about the next stage to Denver. "Leaves at 2, the station master informed them, eyeing their disheveled appearance and Nate's bloodied arm with curiosity. "Tickets are $5 each." Nate counted out the money without hesitation. "We'll be on it." The hours until departure crawled by, each passing minute fraught with anxiety that Frank and his men would appear. Nate insisted on having his arm properly bandaged by the local barber, who doubled as the settlement's doctor in emergencies. Tabitha purchased a few supplies from the general store, a clean shirt for Nate, some food for the journey, and a small knife she could conceal in her boot. When the stagecoach finally arrived, Tabitha's knees nearly gave out with relief. As they boarded, Nate kept a watchful eye on the road leading into town. "He'll never stop looking for me," Tabitha said quietly as the coach lurched into motion. Nate took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "Then we'll make sure he never finds you." The journey to Denver took 2 days, during which Tabitha and Nate rarely let go of each other's hands. They spoke little, both lost in thoughts of what awaited them in the city and what they'd left behind. In Denver, they went directly to the territorial court, where Tabitha filed for divorce on grounds of cruelty and attempted murder. The photographs Thomas had taken, along with sworn statements from Nate and Tabitha, were entered as evidence. "It will take time," the court clerk warned them. "And your husband has the right to contest it." "I understand," Tabitha replied, her voice steady, "but I won't go back to him. Not ever." They found modest lodgings near the courthouse, 2 adjoining rooms in a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. For the first time in days, they were truly safe, with locked doors and the anonymity of the city protecting them. That evening, Nate knocked gently on the door connecting their rooms. When Tabitha opened it, he stood there looking uncertain, his hair damp from bathing, his injured arm in a proper sling provided by a city doctor. "I wanted to make sure you're all right," he said. "It's been quite a journey." Tabitha smiled, suddenly shy. "I'm fine." "Better than I've been in a long time, actually." Nate nodded, seeming relieved. "Good, that's good." He hesitated. "Tabitha, I know this isn't the right time. You're still married, technically, and you've been through so much, but I need you to know." "What?" she prompted when he fell silent. "I care for you," he said simply. "More than I should, given the circumstances, and when this is all over, when you're free, I hope you might consider coming back, to the ranch, with me." Tabitha's heart swelled with emotion. "I've thought of little else," she admitted. "These past days with you, despite the danger, or maybe because of it, have shown me what it means to be truly respected, to be seen." Nate stepped forward, his good hand coming up to cradle her cheek. "You deserve that and more, Tabitha." When their lips met, it felt like coming home. His kiss was gentle, almost reverent, so different from Frank's demanding possession. Tabitha melted into it, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beat steadily beneath her palm. The divorce proceedings took 3 months. Frank contested it viciously, appearing in Denver with accusations that Tabitha had stolen from him, been unfaithful, was mentally unstable. But the evidence against him was too strong, particularly after the sheriff of a neighboring county testified that Frank had a reputation for violence and gambling. Throughout it all, Nate remained by Tabitha's side, finding work at a local livery stable to support them both. In the evenings, they would walk through the city, making plans for a future they dared to believe might be possible. When the judge finally granted the divorce, awarding Tabitha a small settlement from the sale of the store, she wept with relief. Standing on the courthouse steps in the bright autumn sunlight, she felt truly free for the first time in years. "What now?" Nate asked, taking her hand. Tabitha smiled up at him. "Now we go home. To your ranch, our ranch, if you'll have me." Nate's answering smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that." They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at Denver's small Methodist church, with Alina and Miguel Rodriguez as witnesses. The older couple had traveled to the city especially for the occasion, bringing news that Frank had left Silvercreek after losing the store to his debts. "He won't bother you again," Miguel assured them. The sheriff finally realized what kind of man he is when Frank couldn't pay back what he owed. The journey back to Nate's ranch was vastly different from their flight months earlier. They traveled openly, by stagecoach and then on horseback for the final stretch, Tabitha riding proudly astride rather than side saddle. When they crested the final hill and the small cabin came into view, nestled in its valley with the creek sparkling nearby, Tabitha felt a surge of joy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Greaves," Nate said softly, reaching over to take her hand. Tabitha squeezed his fingers, savoring the sound of her new name. "It's perfect." The months that followed were full of hard work and happiness as they expanded the ranch together. Tabitha planted a garden, raised chickens, and learned to shoot, just in case, Nate had said, though they both knew Frank was unlikely to return. Nate added a room to the cabin, built better fences, and increased his herd with Tabitha's settlement money. A year after their wedding, as they sat on their new porch watching the sunset, Tabitha took Nate's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We're going to need another room," she told him, her eyes shining with happiness. Nate's face lit up with wonder. "Really? You're sure?" Tabitha nodded, laughing as he swept her into a gentle embrace. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed against his shoulder. "That night when you found me tied to that post, I thought my life was over." "Instead, it was just beginning," Nate murmured, kissing her tenderly. "For both of us." Their daughter, Alina, was born the following spring, with Alina Rodriguez serving as midwife. She had Nate's hazel eyes and Tabitha's chestnut hair, and both parents agreed she was perfect in every way. As Tabitha watched Nate cradle their infant daughter, his face soft with love, she felt a profound gratitude for the twisted path that had brought her here. Frank's cruelty had nearly killed her, but it had also led her to true love, to a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration. "What are you thinking about?" Nate asked, looking up to find her watching them. "Just that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best," she replied. "If Frank hadn't left me tied to that post, I would have found you some other way," Nate said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be, Tabitha. We were meant to be." As the golden light of sunset filled their home, Tabitha knew he was right. The rope that had once bound her had been cut, not just by Nate's knife, but by his belief in her strength, his respect for her courage, and his unwavering love. She had been held up not just in that moment of rescue, but every day since, by the kind of love she had once believed existed only in stories. And that was a bond no one could ever break.